Hello everyone, I'm really excited to be here. It's been so much fun to work with this group and I'm really proud of the work that we're going to show you today. This won't be one of those things where like in 3 seconds I pull up these things and you see the logo. It's going to be a slow unveil. We went through about a 3-month process to get to here, and we want you to see that process just a little bit so that every time you see the logo and the brand identity moving forward, you know why it existed, why we made the decisions. And these weren't my decisions necessarily. These were our decisions that the group of us worked on together. So the team here at TrueScan certainly participated in designing this. But before I show you all that, I'm just going to take a few slides to say who I am, because you might be wondering, who is this guy? Like, where am I from? What am I doing here? I like to begin all of my presentations with this guy, who is not me, not a younger version of me or an older version of me. This is my grandfather, Al. He's in Pittsburgh here. He's a graphic designer. He's 89, I think, and he just let go of his last client in his 80s, so I hope I'm designing that long. But design is in my genes. I've been designing and doing art, creative things for a long time. My first logo was done in 1991. This is back in Pittsburgh. Please don't hold the Pittsburgh thing against me, but Pittsburgh Penguins were in the Stanley Cup. Apparently I thought their color was red, not black, or it's just faded over time. But I've been designing logos. That's one of the things I love most. I was doing it back then when I was 8 years old, and I've been designing logos since, and here's a few that I've done for various people around the city, around the country. I do a lot of B2B, it seems. I didn't say like I'm gonna do B2B, but I've got a title insurance company up there. I've got a interior decorator up there from Salt Lake, a restaurant from Walnut Hills, a library in Chattanooga, custom furniture, architecture, art supplies. Civil Smith is rail engineering, so they figure out how to get the railroad tracks from the factory to the main line. That was one of my first logos as an independent designer. About 10 years old now, which is good to see up there. So I love doing logos. I have a company called Trischler Design. This is our website. It's really me. I'm a solopreneur. I have contractors that I hire out for stuff, but my big thing is getting to your big idea, and that's what you're going to hear about today, is how do we get to the big idea of TrueScan. When I'm not, or well, before I get to that, my 2 things that I really love to do is brand identity research and then brand identity design. And so the first image up top is a workshop, not unlike the workshop that the TrueScan team went through. That's where I listen to who you are and I listen to who your clients are. I take all of that, I do some more research to understand the story, the history of a company. Kind of my job as an archaeologist in a sense, to dig up things and find things that are important to the brand that can be revealed through the identity, which the bottom, that's a logo I designed for a restaurant in Walnut Hills, Night Drop branch. So the workshop leads to these brand identities. Those are the 2 things that I really like to do. When I'm not doing this, I do a lot of things, but I also teach at DAP, UC. And this is my lecture class, 150 some students. Last year was 200 something students. Just a short story there. I thought I was signing up to teach a class of 20, like this size. Turns out it was of 220. So anyways, enough about me. This is about you. I want to talk about this process. So where do we begin? And I like to begin somewhere in the middle, I think. This was a Post-it note, or at least a rendering of a Post-it note that I drew after the workshop. In fact, I still have this real Post-it note at home. I was cleaning the office and I found it, and it says TrueScan needs a shield. And so when you think of the word shield, like you think of maybe a family crest, and that represents all the uniqueness of a family, the story, what they do, what they're proud of. So that could be a shield or a crest. You think of a shield as protection, which I think that has direct connotations to the work that you guys do as far as like really getting to the details, helping architects, engineers, all sorts of folks, planners make decisions with confidence and protect them from rework, protect them as far as safety goes. And then I think of a shield. We talked a lot in the workshop about like Marvel superheroes. Think of you all in a sense as like these little unsung superheroes working behind the scenes. And so these were some of the things that came out of the workshop that when I looked at your current identity, it's like, oh, it's missing a lot of this like power that you have. And immediately wrote down a shield. And this was before I even knew we were going to be designing an identity. It's like, oh, that'd be fun. Shield, write it down, store it for some other time. So the workshop, I'll start there though. We did this workshop together, and through the workshop, basically I'm listening to the team and gathering all kinds of content about your clients, about you, and it's just a bunch of really, I like to call it raw gold that can be polished and shined and turned into something like content for a website or a video, which was the case that I was hired for with Iron House Studios, was to help them kind of create a narrative for this video that's going to be coming out. But out of this workshop, we got some really cool content together with Iron House. One of the phrases that came out of it was this idea of confidence in every decision. So Brendan talked about red representing lasers. In a sense, like your current identity is selling the idea of like what you do as far as like the technicalities. But why is it important? You've probably heard the old thing like Simon Sinek, jump to why versus what. You're giving people confidence in every decision when you give them your scans. Some other stuff that came out of the workshop was these words that represent your values as TrueScan. So future forward, 100% in on all things. Pioneers, so always like trying new tools, new discoveries, inventing new things. Supercharged, high energy. And then revolution, kind of a revolution in how things are being built, how things are being examined, seen, looked at. So all this kind of leads to, well, I wasn't hired to do an identity. That wasn't my original job. But then Brendan in the middle of the workshop said, do you design logos? Do you do that sort of thing? But my first question to clients, even when I think there's a strong case for it, I think it's really important that clients can say why they want a new logo. And so I always ask the question, what's wrong with the one you have? It's serviceable, it works, like what's really wrong with it? And Brendan basically said everything that he said as he introduced this today. And so this is a survey I had him fill out. I did a little exercise on my own to compare your logo to other logos. And even just looking from afar, it's like, are they all the same company up there in a sense? And then we kind of came up with some other unique questions that we wanted to ask ourselves, like, is red working? Does the globe work? Glad to know Nathan designed it, so I'll be cautious as far as what I say about it. I actually forgot you had. I think you said that in the workshop. So we decided to design a new logo. We agreed on that. There's a Abe Lincoln quote, the idea that if you give him 4 hours to chop down a tree, it'd take 3 hours to sharpen the axe. And that's what this direction process is about, the workshop, kind of building the case and really understanding where we want to go. Defining success before we get there was part of this direction phase. So what's the big idea? We had all this content from the workshop, and it was in like 30 slides. How can we distill that into one slide, one word, or words that would represent what we're moving towards? And this word revolve came out. So it's like revolution, but it's also has this idea of movement and rotation, sort of like the equipment that you use. But it also, I think, was kind of a word for us as a team when we were working that we didn't want to take a half step forward. We wanted to take a giant leap as far as branding this thing. We didn't want it to look like a small evolution, but we wanted it to be a revolution. And so we also came up with these words as TrueScan as a rebel or an explorer. I think the rebel has confidence, the explorer has humility, and so we were trying to bring those words together as well. So this might not make sense now, or it might be wondering what all these words have to do, but as a designer, I need words first, and then I can start seeing images. And I want to make sure the images match these words, because otherwise we're just making something cool and trendy that you're going to have to redesign in a couple of years. In that line of thinking, before we design a project, we also make sure that we have some measurements of success so that the team isn't just like, I just don't like that color. Why? Oh, I don't know. Well, we have these questions here that the team, designers, non-designers, anybody can use and say, is it working or is it working? And the 4 questions we had were, does it act as a shield or crest? Does it stand out in the crowd? Does it communicate alignment and certainty, which came up during feedback at one point in the presentations, which I'll talk about, where alignment is really critical. And does the message start to lead the charge? A lot of the companies that we've seen use the images, and the images all kind of look similar because they're coming through the same company products or whatever that you all buy, whether it's like, I can't remember the brand names, like Bari or Lumex, so a lot of the images are going to come out similar. What about the message that goes on top of those images? That's going to be what drives a difference for you. And so that needs to lead the charge, which you'll see eventually. We started asking ourselves, what about the name? I kept hearing TrueScan. I didn't hear TrueScan 3D a lot when in shorthand speaking. And then also I noticed that it's really hard to type it up correctly, getting the 3D to match the same type height as TrueScan. And then it also had all lowercase, which is kind of like a Silicon Valley thing, like Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook. Do you want to be associated with those, which could be a good thing technically, being a startup, or do you want to have more confidence, more sturdiness? And so the team together decided to go with this option 5 here, which is removing 3D, having a capital T, capital S, so that you clearly see True and Scan together. And you can still use TrueScan 3D if you want in your URL or your Twitter or all those things, because it was your name and it still has some usage. But keeping it simple as far as like emails, letterheads, all that stuff, we decided to go TrueScan. And every process, again, direction phase, I want to kind of understand what your team likes and dislikes, because you're going to have to wear this thing. It's going to go on my website in a case study, but I don't have to wear it on a t-shirt like you do. So I want to understand what your team likes and dislikes as far as like logo, colors, aesthetics, all that. So we go through a logo workshop. And the first question we asked is, what about the globe? Sorry again, Nathan. And we typed in globe on Google, and we found all these globe logos. And I know your logo is not a stock logo because it was designed by Nathan, but there are logos out there that can be purchased for like $80, $100 that are very similar, which another scanning company could go in and buy very quickly. So we want to create a customized feel and approach, something that if it is recreated, it's clearly copied, and you can say, why are you doing that? Versus there's a lot of globes out there, and so it's easy for people to kind of look similar in this case. Then we looked at the field too. So this is engineering, architecture, all sorts of businesses and organizations that could be similar to what you do. And we categorized them. So we have outliers up in the top left. We have the generic logos, which I'd classify generic logos as they're using a sans serif typeface. So if you've heard of Helvetica or Arial, that's a very default typeface. Out of the box, they're using the red, they're using the black. Maybe they're using a single shape like a circle. And then we have companies that are focused on communicating alignment, which there are a lot of, whether it's the circles overlapping or a scope or lines that kind of overlap with one another. And then there's dimension, people using shapes, 3D, all these things to kind of communicate that we're working in a 3-dimensional space. What we didn't necessarily love any of the outliers up there, but we wanted to push TrueScan into the outlier position where it stood out amongst the crowd, and you liked it. So that's, looking at these, this really helped us see how the current logo definitely, this built the case for new identity and moving far away from the original. These were some logos that people did like, and I like to look at these again just to make sure I understand what your team, what your culture is about. We got Captain America up there, of course, sturdy shield. We've got some other shield shapes. We have some logos that are represent people in your in your business, in your field. The one that really stood out though is the D-Dot logo in the bottom right corner. And we didn't know what that was. I was actually up in Detroit though a couple weeks ago and saw it on a bus. It's the Detroit Transportation logo. And I think what we subconsciously, in hindsight looking at this, what we liked about that logo is that inline, the line in the middle, almost represents, it looks like scanning. It looks like it would move. There's motion to it. There's dimension to it because there's 2 layers. And Leanne specifically pointed, that was the last logo we looked at. She's like, I love that logo. And so that kind of stood out as like, how can we create something that sturdy? How can we maybe use an inline to represent TrueScan? Then we looked into, I like to look at historic design and see how other people have been solving problems in the past. We looked at the 70s as an interesting time period. This is the time when NASA got their new logo, Deutsche Bank got their new logo, and there's all this like futuristic, strong, like confidence, like technology was buzzing, and they were thinking forward. A lot like I think TrueScan is thinking forward. So looking at these logos, how can we pull from them? Keep pointing there, but actually keep pointing there. And then we looked at logos currently, contemporary logos and identities currently. And what's interesting about these is how they're pushing message and kind of like revolutionary message, like renewed freedom. Teach first is a teaching thing in the UK. It has a T in it, has an F, not an S. But how can we pull from these things contemporary design? So all of that combined, we have the mandates, we have the word revolve, we have some logos. That kind of gave me the ammunition to design something. I knew what your team liked, I knew who your team was through the workshop. How can we combine that into design? So let's talk about the reveal. So I'm not going to reveal it on the next slide, but slowly in the next couple slides, you're going to see the new logo. You'll see on the previous slide here, it says crappy first draft. And there's an author named Anne Lamott, and she always says you have to get through she says another word, but crappy first drafts to get to the good stuff. And I actually like to show my clients the crappy first drafts because they can react to that. Rather than me spending 3 months designing something perfect that you hate, I'd rather spend 3 weeks designing a few things and getting a response to that. And then let's work towards that 3-month-long project that's really strong and good. So always working towards one solution, but showing some crappy first drafts in the process. And so these were some logo marks, just looking at the typeface alone for TrueScan that we began with. Some of them are dimensional, some of them are stencils. What we really like though is the one in the bottom right-hand corner. And let's get a close-up of that. This is classified as a slab serif typeface. That means it kind of has the slabs under the T, has the slabs on the ends, whereas like a sans serif doesn't have those. A serif is really classical. What's nice about this typeface, it was designed originally for ESPN. It has kind of a sports connotation to it. This idea of a team, rah-rah, like supercharged. It's also very different than anybody else is using in your field. Different is good, but it also represents you. And then we looked at some marks. These are just a few. There's more sketches that can't fit into a presentation. And some of them are three-dimensional, some of them have some contrast going on that's interesting. But a lot of them are just putting a T and S next to each other, which were a lot like the generic logos that we were looking at originally. And so how can we combine the T and S in a way that's not so generic and maybe more like a shield? And so keep on going back to that shield idea, which was on that post-it note. These are some sketches. I got to a point where I'm doing all the generic logos. And I had to get in my sketchbook off the computer. How do we make this shield work? And so this was one morning of frustration of looking at too many T's next to S's. How do I get out of that? And so we ended up combining the T and the S and the shield into this mark. And this is still in the classified under the crappy first draft level. We'll evolve this. You'll see further. But this is what it starts to look like. We've got the T and the S combined. We've got that inline that represents scanning. We've got the shield. And then we've got TrueScan next to it. But I like to say feedback moves you forward. And Nathan had some really great feedback on the typeface. We had some good feedback on the shield from the team. And we said, okay, we're moving in the right direction, but this isn't it yet. How do we get it just a little bit further so that it's stronger and it really fits the brand? And so we actually went deep into the typeface and aligned certain things that weren't aligned, so that again, communicating alignment is important even in these little slabs and arms on the typeface, that those things align, because that's what matters to you guys. And then took that shield and evolved it as much as possible, trying so many different options, even further than what we had tried. I don't even think the team that went through this process has seen this screen yet. Trying variations of that shield to get it to the precise, like what it needs to be to match the typeface, what it needs to be to match you all, where it kind of looks like a shield, but it isn't super obvious as a shield. All these things were considered and tried, where we ended up with this, TrueScan. And it can rotate, it can revolve. This is, Leanne, the point where if we want to unveil these, or wait, you want to give out the shirts?
Nope, you can run veil.
Keep going, keep going. All right. So this is the final logo, and this is what it starts to look like in different areas. We've got a horizontal version, we've got a vertical version, we've got a version where it can be placed on top of a shield itself, the outline of the S and the T and the S. We've got new colors that you can use. So the orange and all these colors come from the safety palette, all pushing back to this idea of like protection, safety. And so your primary colors are black, orange, white, and gray. But when you need to have some sort of outline color, whether it's for graphs or data points, you've got the green, the blue, the yellow, the purple, and the red as well. You can see how it starts to look compared to your competition. Colors are standing out, the typeface stands out, the mark stands out, the mark being the T and the S together as a shield. So these were the questions that we asked. Does it act as a shield or a crest? Does it stand out in the crowd? Does it communicate alignment and certainty? And then does the message start to lead? You haven't seen the message yet, but we'll get into that in the coming slides. But we answered these questions. We felt like this was a really strong foot forward with the identity. It's a drastic change from the original, but it really meets all the things, the criteria that we set through the workshop, through the direction process. Let's see what it looks like in context. So here you can see it on a helmet. Embroidering this thing is really important. You can see it's embroidered in front of you. We had to make sure that this thing, the logo, could be embroiderable. Business cards, these are just mock-ups, not necessarily what the official business card will look like, but we've got the confidence in every decision front and center, again, moving with that message forward. A mock proposal cover inside, what it could look like. Inside again, and then another. Inside the proposal. This is a mock website, a concept. It's not necessarily what the exact website will look like, but what you can see is we've got confidence in every decision leading the way. We can start using that shape as an outline so that anywhere you have content, you can have that shape. So even if you cover up the TrueScan logo, this looks like a TrueScan website, which is really important to have that. And we've got an overlay of orange on the image, that way that you can kind of say, this is our image, this is our color, this is our image, and it separates us from other people's images. A truck, potentially, a future truck could look like this with the museum center on the front. We've got the outline of the shape there, the back of the truck and the front of the truck. Again, like if you guys were Marvel superheroes, what kind of truck would you have? We wanted to kind of give you that look and feel. It has minimized risk, save time, build better on the back. Again, the words that represent your team, potentially internally, what's it look like inside this building? Step inside your future with some of the content that came out of the workshop. And then we've got these posters, and you want me to show these right now. So we have them here. These are your values that came out of the workshop. We've got obsessive pioneers of the future was language that came out of the workshop. X-ray vision for your next building. Confidence in the details, which we've seen. Beautiful, predictable. Again, it's like that juxtaposition of these two words, creativity and engineering in a sense. And then the logo. Make sure I get through these. So there's some posters that could be hung up around the office space, again, communicating what you do. Using these images, which are really beautiful, if you crop them in certain ways and add that color to it, really helps you stand out. Now implementation, so I'll just take a couple of slides to talk about that. So I've designed it, you have it, you're gonna start using it, you have t-shirts or you have polos already. I know there's a plan for launching this thing, but how do you use this stuff? That's the big question, because here's standards. So we've got verbal identity standards. This is all on a PDF, on a hard drive. You've got your trust script, you've got your visual identity, when to use the logo, when to use the colors, all the variations of the logos, using the shapes, and then how to create these orange overlays on the image. And so, if you want to have confidence in every decision using your new identity, use the standards. And with that, I thank you, and this has been a real pleasure. Excited to share this with you.